right. Well, we are back for another session of Ask the GM. We've got Dan Pike here. And the way that this is going to work here, we've got the Q&A feature set up in Zoom, or you can use raise hand to ask a question. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to say, I have a short statement I want to start with tonight, and then we can go right into the questions from that, if that's okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So first of all, welcome everybody. It's great to see continuing interest in what's happening in the community, and I appreciate your interest because that's part of what helps make us collectively a better community. And there's something I want to address a little bit for the community, make folks aware of some of the things that are going on. And I'm going to start with just sort of a philosophical pitch of my own, which is around the idea of grace, and that, you know, I'm just going to encourage all of us to make allowances for our friends, our neighbors, those we disagree with, and ourselves to be human. That collectively we make up a community, and each of us has threads to contribute to the whole cloth that makes us all a better place. Sudden Valley is a wonderful place, spicing our lives and the lives of those we interact with more grace will make it an even better place. And my thinking around this, the reason this is kind of on my mind, is that we had an employee leave this week who was a really good employee. And, you know, as with situations like this, there's always a number of factors involved. But one of the factors that he shared with me was the fact that he felt threatened and attacked by members of the community at times for doing his job. He was our environmental planner. So he worked on a number of issues related to people building their houses or dealing with disasters, removing dangerous trees and the like. But he was accosted a number of times by folks that were stressed. You know, I know that a lot of folks suffered damage from the flooding that started in November and didn't seem to stop until mid-January. And it just became a burden. And unfortunately, he's not the only person that's had that happen. We've our front staff in the admin office regularly experience people that are hostile and it's sort of blaming the victim. You know, our staff are deserving of respect. They're working hard to make the place better. What they're doing generally is they're implementing policies that are set out by the board or processes that I've identified for how those policies should be implemented. So I'd encourage you, if you have something that you're upset about, email me. My address is dan.pike@suddenvalley.com, or email or talk to one of the board members that represent you. And try to show grace to the staff. They're really working hard, trying to make it better. They're human, they're not perfect. But overall, you've got a great staff and we want to keep them. It's besides being what I believe to be morally the right thing, it's also fiscally the prudent thing, because it's really expensive to hire and train people only to have them leave and take those skills someplace else. So with that, I just wanted to get that out there. And again, please contact me or a board member if you're really fired up about something and you feel like you need to vent. I used to be in public office. My skin is really thick, or my thin is really skick. I'm not sure. My skin is really thick. I don't take offense easily. I like to have those conversations. So I just want to put that out there. And again, I do appreciate everyone's interest in making the community better, which I believe is what everyone in this room here tonight is here for. So with that, let's get to the questions. And thank you for tolerating my little sermon.
Appreciate that, Dan. So yes, for anybody who wants to fire away with questions, the raise hand feature in Zoom's down at the bottom of the screen on a PC or on a Mac, or on the app. You should be able to tap a little menu button and you'll see raise hand in there. Alternatively, you can use the question and answer feature. Q&A should be located about the same place.
If I don't get any questions, I may start singing. Trust me, you probably prefer to ask me questions.
All right, looks like Diane's got her hand raised first. So I'm going to go ahead and bring you on over here, Diane, excuse me. and you can unmute when you're ready.
Okay, I did that.
We can hear you.
Great.
So I was asking last night on the homeowner comment about the complaint process.
Mhm.
So I did leave you a message today. So can you talk about the general complaint process, how it works? And I can ask you questions, or you can just tell me kind of in general, and then I can ask you questions.
Sure. So generally, you can come down. There's complaint forms. You can email me, or you can also email. Is that my?
No, I'm so sorry, Diane. You've got a little bit of an echo, so I just went ahead and muted you while Dan's responding. When you're
Okay.
ready to respond, just
Thank you.
be sure to unmute. Yep.
That's fine. So we've got forms to fill out down at the admin office, but in addition, I'd say depending on the complaint, for example, if you've got an issue with the golf course, I'd encourage you to talk to the golf course director directly. Similar with Parks and Rec, we have a new director, so be gentle with him at first. But Dan Preen's a great guy. He's a Bellingham native, and he's really easy to talk to. Similarly, if you've got issues around financial stuff, you can talk to Joel Heberling, who's our finance director. And we have the maintenance supervisor is Mike Brock, and also good to talk to on maintenance related issues. So that's sort of a broad overview. Do you have a specific complaint or issue that you want to bring forward, or that you're wondering where to file? I should also say we have, for a lot of things, normally we would have our environmental planner, and unfortunately we are vacant there right now. So those should just probably come to me at this point.
All right. So can you walk me through, like, say a complaint is sent in? What happens after that? And like the timing of it, and if you're, I guess if you have adequate staff, and if there's any priority made, that kind of thing, just some general.
So it's really hard to know without knowing what you're talking, without some specifics. But so generally we look at things and we determine, first of all, not every complaint needs a response. So some things don't get responded to. Other things get prioritized according to what's going on. So for example, if something is emergent, if something is a health or welfare situation, obviously we get to it as quickly as we could, or we might tell people to contact a public safety, our security office, or even contact the sheriff's office if it's a critical issue, or the fire department. But beyond that, it'll get sent to the appropriate department to deal with. And I don't at this point have any hard and fast process for each department to follow. So I'm not sure. Again, I'm kind of working in a cloud here, trying to figure out what you're looking for. But I guess what I would say is, if you feel like something's not being followed up on, contact me, and I'll see what I can do to make sure that the questions get addressed.
So I saw on the complaint form that there's a little note about informing the person who complained what action or follow-up was done. Is that what happens?
Well, again, it depends on the situation, but generally I think that should be what happens. So did you have a complaint that you didn't get follow-up on?
No, I've never made a complaint, so
Yeah.
so I'm trying to learn about it.
Yeah.
And the process. And also, there's a question of response. If if you guys are staffed enough to respond in a timely manner. I guess that's another concern.
So I'm going to ask you to move. So I guess what I would say is, I think that for the most part, we're staffed enough to respond in a timely manner. I mean, obviously it depends. We've got about 30 staff roughly. And all of us have things that we're doing besides responding to complaints. So, I don't want to give an impression that people are going to respond within the hour or even within the day necessarily. You should get some sort of email acknowledgement fairly quickly. But beyond that, it sort of depends on what the issue is. But what I would say is helpful is that if people get, if people contact us with a complaint, the more specific you are, the easier it is to address it and make sure that we're actually targeting our answer to the issue that you're bringing, that you're intending to bring forward. And also let us know, that you would appreciate follow-up, so that if there's a case where, sometimes people say, well, there's a tree down in the road or in a ditch or something, and so we go take care of it. We don't necessarily go back and let people know, yeah, that's gone, because we figure people will see it when they drive by or whatever. But if you want to know that, yeah, that's been addressed or that's on the docket to be addressed, because sometimes we aggregate things. So using trees again as an example, if we have a bunch of debris to clear up, we might aggregate some of that stuff so we can get it into one sort of project package. So it might take a week or even more, depending on what's going on. And by the way, there's a clean green this Saturday, so help us by getting that debris out yourselves and taking it down to Area Z is really helpful for all of us. It helps keep our culverts and ditches flowing more freely, so there's less issues around flooding. So again, specificity is really helpful, and letting us know if you want a follow-up response, or you want to know what the outcome was of your complaint or your inquiry. But I think generally most questions we're able to answer. And sometimes it takes a little longer than others. It sort of depends. If there's a policy question that sort of underlies the question, like we recently had a question about, what to do about somebody had a banner that somebody found offensive. It was hard to see from the road, at least according to security and other folks. And there's sort of a whole can of worms around some of those things where, we had a discussion about it. I had a discussion about it with the board and with the board's attorney, and what the attorney pointed out, because one of the board members said, well, we should just enforce every violation that comes our way. And he said, well, the problem is that, if you look at the bylaws, if you enforce things down to nitpicky details, you can go broke enforcing all of those things. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, which side of the gray line do you want to land on a particular issue? And so it's a struggle. And at times, the board will get it what you probably perceive as correctly, and other times you'll probably think that they've got overreach or underreach or whatever. And I'll feel the same way. And I'm sure they'll feel sometimes that I bring them ideas that are harebrained. And all of those are legitimate feelings, but at the end of the day, the board gets to set the policy. And my job is to try to implement it. And community members, one of your jobs is to reflect back to the board. Yeah, we think those are working well, or, I think maybe some fine tuning would be helpful here. And you can reflect that back through me or to the board members directly, or any number of ways.
So I was wondering what the possible actions are that can be made, for some things. I know I'm being vague. But you know what I mean? Like, is there a limit to what actions can be taken against?
Well, so I'll use an example that I was actually going to talk about, and I didn't when I was talking. Sort of did my preamble there with talking about respect and things like that. We have on our books the ability to fine community members for doing things that are inappropriate behaviors. So, for example, we could find somebody if they act in a verbally threatening way. We could easily fine somebody $100. That's on our bylaws. If they obstruct or take further action, then it could be $1,000, and it ultimately goes up to $5,000. So those are actually things we're looking at, that I'm looking at and thinking about bringing to the board as a way to discourage people from behaving inappropriately at the front window with staff, because that's been a problem. And that's a way that other community associations have found is very effective to get people to artificially find grace if they don't have it within themselves. So that's an example of, we can definitely, as an association, that we're a private entity, we're nonprofit, we're private. We have a lot of leeway in what we can do. So we can fine people, we can take other actions. That being said, we are a community. And so our preferred course is to not go to punitive behavior or punitive actions as a go-to, but have conversations with people. And I would encourage people to talk to their neighbors too, because one of the things that I find is that a lot of people don't know their neighbors as much as they did when I was a kid. And I won't say how long ago that was, but it was a long time ago. And a lot of problems could be alleviated, and there'd be less work on the staff, and as a result, less cost to the community if people would talk to their neighbors about things both that they like and things that they are challenged by. Because, a lot of times neighbors want to get along with each other, but they don't even know each other. So there isn't that relationship, and building relationships is a key to navigating. This is me on my pedestal again. I think building relationships is a key to navigating better through life in all kinds of ways, including getting along with your neighbors and not having to seek redress through a third party like the community association administration or the police or whoever.
Okay, well, thank you. I was the reason I want to remain anonymous.
And that's fine. So
and I
would encourage you to do is, if you want to follow up, send me an email. I'm not going to divulge, I'm not going to broadcast your name or anything, or you can call me, and we can have a further conversation. I would like to let other people have some opportunity to talk if they want, but I understand there's a lot of reasons to want to be anonymous, and to, people have different concerns, and I respect that. But I'm not sure that I've fully answered your question. So if you want to follow up, you can do that with me, and I'll find a time.
Yeah, I would love to have a chance to talk to you. And I did leave a message.
I'm pretty sure I saw your note. I had a lot of things on my plate today, so I didn't respond to all my notes today, but I will reach out to you then.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And let's see here. So we've got a few questions that have come up in Q&A. The first one, there's a group of us here watching together, and they'd like to know at what point the board will be meeting in person.
So, that's an interesting question, because that was asked by a board member of other board members last night, and there wasn't a clear consensus. I will say, so I went to graduate school with a bunch of epidemiologists at Harvard. I wasn't in an epidemiology program. I was at the Kennedy School of Government, but a bunch of epidemiologists happened to be in my program because they were working on public health issues, and a lot of them work for the CDC, or some of them work for Harvard now. And so I want to start by saying that the pandemic isn't over. So, for example, I don't know if people are aware, but currently there's over 700 people dying every day because of COVID in the US. I haven't looked up the local statistics, but certainly my recommendation to the board would be to pay attention to what's happening locally as we think about things like opening up or not. I also need to look into what the ADA implications are of meeting in person versus meeting remotely, because if meeting in person means the people who are health challenged, who are vulnerable, do not get the same access as everyone else does, then that has ADA implications, which, we've already had some discussions about ADA around the dock, and trust me, that would be minor compared to ADA challenges around not providing equal access to government or quasi-governmental meetings. So I know that there's a lot of folks that are anxious to get back to in-person meetings. I will say for myself, I do appreciate the qualitative difference in meeting in person. Certainly, I will share that I've been vaccinated and boosted, and my kids, both of whom work in high exposure situations, have as well, and other people in my life, and I have gotten to a point where I am okay getting into gatherings of people. I still wear masks when I go into stores most of the time. There's a lot of the pandemic is not over, and there is a new COVID variant that's coming around that's having a pretty significant impact in Europe and Africa. So, the short answer is I was tasked by the board with looking into this and coming up with some recommendations, and I will do so. I will say that I would always rather err on the side of caution than say, okay, we'll do it wide open and then see some people in the community suffer significant health consequences as an outcome. So we are looking at it. The board is going to be discussing it. I'm not sure if it's at the next meeting or the one after that, but they have tasked me to bring back some thoughts and some information so that they can see what's happening. And so I'm not just going to go by sort of information that I derive, but also I'll look at what other comparable institutions are doing, how they're managing it. I'll talk to the health department and see if they have any specific recommendations about, at what point does it feel from their perspective to be a better or less good solution. So, I think we're going to have COVID with us going forward. So I'm not under the illusion that we should just never go back to public meetings again. I want to be clear about that. But I also feel like, 700 people dying every day in the US, that means every week we're getting a couple of World Trade Center bombings happening in terms of the loss of life that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And I think that's a significant loss. It's a collective loss to all of us. Again, thinking about the threads that make up our community, that phrase us a bit. So I think it's an important conversation to have. I do think that something is lost when we don't meet in person, and something is lost when people are not able to participate because they can't meet in person, and the allowances when you have an in-person meeting for people to interact remotely aren't as satisfying or haven't been in the past. Maybe we can find a way to do that. And I know that's something John's going to look at too, is how do we do a hybrid sort of approach? And will that work effectively for us? So it's probably an unsatisfying response. The answer is maybe we'll meet again in person soon. And maybe we won't, but I don't even have the full information to tell you which way it's likely to go right now.
Appreciate the answer there, Dan. We do have one that came through chat at about the same time. And this says, I would value hearing what your vision for Sudden Valley is, what you feel the priorities are, what you feel is important to building community. What are your priorities in terms of the natural environment?
Those are some great points to touch on, Nadine. So thank you for that. So, my vision for Sudden Valley really is to reflect the board's vision, but I'll tell you what I value. And I don't think it's inconsistent with what the board values. I want to see, actually, I'll tell you one of the things that I personally value, and I haven't talked to the board about this, but I don't think that they would be averse to it, is I'd like to see us, again, become less factionalized and more of a community where we can have differences, but they don't become, that we don't take them as personal challenges. Because what I find, I'll tell you, when I was mayor, I used to go and talk to pretty much any group that wanted me to come and talk to them. And one group that I talked with fairly regularly was called the Northwest Business Club. And my political sensibilities or whatever are kind of centrist, maybe a little bit left of center. and the business club was pretty right of center. And somebody asked me why I would bother to go to talk to a group that was not supportive of where I was coming from. And I said, well, I said a couple of things. One, I said strategically, it's good because I go into there with 0 votes and I might come out with a couple. Whereas if I go into a group of my friends, a couple of them are going to be offended because I don't agree with them on everything, and they're going to go for somebody else. But the other is that I learned something when I talk to people that disagree with me. When I talk with people that just reflect back what I already believe, I really haven't grown. And that doesn't mean that talking with me, if you disagree with me, means that I'll be converted to your perspective, but hopefully I'll understand it. And I hope that you'll understand mine if we're not in alignment. So one of the things that I really like to do is see less factionalism and more conversation about issues in a meaningful, productive way. And I think that there are opportunities to do that. And again, I think this is where in-person would be really helpful, because I find that, people in the same room will communicate in a different manner frequently than people will in an online forum. So that's one of the things I'd like to see is find ways to get us to recognize that we're all on Team Sudden Valley. We're all wanting this place to be even better than it is, and we're all here because we liked it already when we moved here. So that's a really important thing to me, is to try to find ways to bring us together and to have us be less divided as a community. In terms of building community, I think that finding opportunities to work together. So, for example, one of the things that I'm excited about is a guy that I used to know from his prior work with Sustainable Solutions is now working for Puget Sound Energy as their community outreach person. And so he apparently tried to reach out to Sudden Valley, I don't know, 3 years ago or something, or a couple of years ago. And whoever the GM was at the time, he made appointments and came out twice, and each time ended up sitting for over an hour and then being told, no, the GM has no time for you. And so he gave up. But then he saw my name and he recognized me. And so he called me up and said, hey, I'd like to come out to you and talk to you, because I think that a lot of the residents and the businesses and the association itself could benefit from some of the programs and incentives that Puget Sound Energy has. And so and when he told me that, I was like, I've been kind of thinking about how can I find something that I don't think anyone will really disagree with, somebody that comes out and says, hey, we'll help you pay for better insulating your house, or to buy more efficient washer and dryers and things that just, make your life better and a little bit less expensive. And at the same time, he said he's got really great incentives for example, the businesses in the strip mall on, right on Lake Whatcom Boulevard there. And he's got some incentives for the community association as well. So he's going to come out sometime in the next couple of weeks to meet with some folks that we have on staff and as consultants to talk about the different things that he can do for us, both for us as an association and the buildings and the like that we manage, because he says there's a lot, he thinks we can save enough just from the things that we manage to pay for an employee's costs. So in other words, it would save us enough money that we could either add an employee or have that much extra money left over compared to what we're currently spending on energy and other costs. And the timing is good because we already have to do a fairly significant rebuild for El Agave. And so they have incentives for commercial cooking equipment is one example. So we're going to look at all those things and see what we can do to save the community as an association money, but also to bring PSC folks out to meet with individual homeowners to see what they can get in terms of savings and opportunities as well. So that's just one example. I'm always looking to connect dots, and I think that's one that I think will be pretty exciting for folks, but there'll be others that will come up too. So I'm looking for things, and if people have ideas about things that would be great community building exercises, I'd certainly welcome input. Let's see, priorities in terms of the natural environment. So one of the things is I think that for better or worse, we're under a bunch of overlays about how we manage, particularly water. And I think that, in my mind, that's a good thing because because it gets us all, it means we don't have to fight about what we should do. We're already having people say, if you don't do this, we're going to do some things that you're not going to like. So then it becomes a conversation of how can we be more effective at preserving, our riparian habitat, which is, along streams. What can we do? Because the thing that drives most of this is there's an adjudicated right for salmon to have habitat. So salmon have the most senior water rights in the state. I know way more about water than I ever hoped to, because Bellingham has great water rights, and we ended up in a situation of trying to partner on actually natural resource issues and habitat preservation issues with other entities, and used our water rights as part of what we would negotiate with. But I think, I do believe, I think that a lot of people, maybe probably the majority of people living in Sudden Valley, are here in at least some part because they value the natural environment. And I think, all of us want to have a softer footprint. And at the same time, living here collectively, we have an impact. So I think, looking for ways to reduce our impact at as much as possible, no negative impact to our quality of life. I think frequently it will add to quality of life. But finding ways to do that is a really positive thing to do. And especially when we can do that and also find savings, resource savings. So that's just touching on some of those things that I care about. I know that a lot of people in the community care about. I know that a lot of board members care about. But to be clear, the board didn't give me any particular direction on what I'm just saying now. So this is just sharing some of my own thoughts. And at the end of the day, I'm implementing the board's policies.
All right, appreciate that, Dan. Question in Q&A here. And this is kind of going back a couple months here at this point. I read about refunds of transfer fees. Is this still occurring, and what's the process to request those?
So it is occurring. So our finance director is working on the process. Unfortunately, it's more complicated than we hoped. But I would say if you are looking to request those, I would contact the finance department. I don't know this for certain, but if they aren't, I think that they should probably start maintaining a file of folks that have requested that, so that as we get the process itself it's a little more complicated than we'd hoped. So it's taking a little bit longer to get a process that will withstand scrutiny, legal scrutiny in place. But I think that should be coming up in the next month or two. And so if you are wanting to be in that queue and want to just, let people know that you would like to get that refund, I would contact the finance department. As a stand-in, you could send it to me and I'll forward it on, but it's probably most efficient just to contact them directly.
Okay, few questions coming up here in Q&A. One is asking, on behalf of the group, we'd like to know why emails are rarely or seem to never be answered.
Well, so I guess it depends on what the I guess I should say it depends on what the emails are regarding. And it depends on who they're being sent to. So, and I will say that I don't answer all of my emails. Sometimes that's because things are in litigation, and how I answer things, it's sometimes safer from a litigation perspective to not answer things. Sometimes it's just because I'm busy and the issue does not seem to rise to a point where it requires a response. Sometimes people send questions that are, I'm trying to think of the word, not redundant, but self-evident. I think they send things because they want to let off steam, which is fine. But a lot of questions do get answered. So I'm not, if you're feeling like you're not being heard, or you're not getting an answer, whether it's from me or from somebody else, send me another email and I'll see what's going on. And if it's for me, about me, I'll look at that and see if there's something I can do to respond. And if it's for somebody else that's not responding, I'll talk to them and see what the situation is.
There's a question in Q&A here, and it kind of mirrors one that was put into chat. And they're asking which staff positions are open, and what is the time frame expected to be fully staffed?
Well, I don't have a list of all the open positions, but I can tell you that we have recently filled several senior positions, which makes me feel a lot better, because it means that I have other people to share a load with, and we can make progress then on other fronts. So, for example, we've filled the maintenance director position, the maintenance superintendent position. We filled the Parks and Rec director position. I have received authority to fill the deputy general manager position, and I believe we have identified somebody, but I have not. Those connections have not been made to make that deal complete. So I can't say that one's done yet, but that's one that's going to happen. Hopefully within the next month, we'll have somebody in that seat. We still have a couple of positions that we need. We're going to be hiring probably 3 maintenance positions in the near future. We are, and when you say how many positions are filled or not filled, I think people need to realize there's a lot of variance according to the time of year. So right now we're just starting to ramp up on some seasonal hires for the golf course and some other folks. But there's not a lot of vacancies other than maintenance right now. And again, we're going to be hiring within the next month or so. We'll probably be hiring 3 people. And we need to hire obviously an environmental planner, because unfortunately he resigned, it was a loss both because he was good at his job, and it was a loss because it's expensive to fill a position like that. Just the cost of finding somebody. And again, that's why it's really important that people respect our employees. Again, come and complain to me if you need to complain. And if you want to yell at me, I may suggest we take it outside, so so that my ears don't ring quite as much from things bouncing off the walls. But it's really not fair, and it's not fiscally appropriate. It's fiscally irresponsible as a community for us to drive good employees away. But we're fairly well staffed right now. Again, getting the senior management team filled out has been something that has been driving me since I came on board, which was just the very end of December. And it takes a while, and you don't want to bring everybody on at once. It's just too hard to get through the process of our hiring process to have everybody going through at once. Because one of the things this board does that I applaud them for is they've included staff in the hiring decisions of senior management. And so, but that means there's a time commitment for those applicants to meet with staff as well as with the board members, and and give those applicants a chance to get a sense of the community, and as well as the personalities that they'd be working with, so that both sides can determine, yeah, this is a good fit, or no, it's not.
Okay, we've got a question about a committee that hasn't been around for a little bit here. What is the status of the Parks and Recs and Trails Committee? Will it be renewed this year now that there's a new director?
So I have to say, I don't have all the answers, and that's one I don't have. So I'll have to look into that and see. I'm not sure, I would, in my thinking, that probably would be resurrected. I can tell you the new director is really into outdoor recreation, and I think that he is going to be a welcome presence in the community. So regardless of what happens with that particular idea, I would encourage people to meet him. His name is Dan Perrine. He's a really nice guy, and he's in good shape. So if he wants to go on a run with you, bring your racing flats.
I believe this question here from Nadine was what she asked earlier in chat. There is another one here on Q&A. They're coming in. We've got volunteerism helps create a sense of community by building relationships. Community events, emergency management, parks and rec committee are examples of things not happening or being encouraged. Thoughts on bringing back community involvement?
Well, so I want to say that, I don't want to step out ahead of the board, because the the board has been spread thin because there wasn't a GM for a while. So I don't know what committees are in hiatus because of that and which ones aren't. I'm also not sure, why certain committees are active or less or not active. But and volunteerism is a great thing. It does have limits though too. So sometimes voluntary organizations aren't the best fit for a problem. And so in some situations you may find that we're not, that there's not that there's not the support for a voluntary organization, because even voluntary organizations can, if depending on how they're being managed, can put a lot of weight on staff time and resources or community time and resources. So I think everyone agrees that the idea of volunteers is wonderful, and I think volunteering is great. I volunteer, and my hat's off to others that do. But recognize it's the community association's job isn't to provide or support volunteer opportunities, but to provide for a successful and vibrant community. Certainly volunteer organizations and volunteers can be an important part of that. But I think it's also important that volunteer organizations should be able to stand on their own feet without financial input from the association. I mean, I'm not saying there won't be occasional financial support, because there probably will be at times when it makes sense to do so. But that again is within the purview of the board to determine when those situations make sense and when they don't. And when we don't have, if we start having too much staff time going in support of volunteer activities, then it ends up in a situation where we have to ask our community, is this what you want? If it means that we might have to either cut back some other things or ask for increased assessment. And so that's sort of the tension that's inherent there. So I appreciate the volunteerism. I think volunteerism is a great thing. But like anything in life, it's not the be all and end all. We need to have jobs that pay us, as well as doing the volunteer stuff that may nourish our soul a bit more. And we sometimes need to have professional organizations doing things if we really want to address a problem meaningfully long term, as opposed to relying on volunteers to do things that fall apart if a key volunteer leaves or loses interest.
Another question here in Q&A. And this starts off with, this may be a complicated question. I noticed that a couple of years ago, AM and PM beaches were private, but in the last couple of years, they've been open to the public. I understand this has something to do with legal rights to beach access. I want to understand this better, also because we as homeowners are now picking up costs of maintaining the heavier use and sometimes abuse of those areas. I'd like to have a better sense of the legalities and also how we will handle this going forward.
Well, again, this is an area that I have just limited familiarity. I do have some understanding of some of the some of beach access in Sudden Valley. So Sudden Valley has an easement of 25 feet in front of a lot of the homes that are waterfront homes. There's no waterfront homes whose property rights extend all the way to the water in Sudden Valley, at least not along Lake Whatcom. I'm not, I don't think it's true along the streams. There's riparian rights there as well. So I'm not aware of any rights where the homeowner's property line goes right to the water. So at times, depending on how things were being managed, some of those water fronting properties that didn't actually reach the waterfront acted as if they did. So there were people that were, putting out their furniture or fencing off. In fact, we just had to send somebody a notice that they couldn't have their fence go all the way to the water, because 25 feet of that fence was impeding access that belongs to all of us collectively in Sudden Valley. Now with AM and PM beaches, I'm not sure what the situation is there. There are different things that could be in play. For example, we're a nonprofit corporation, and the marina is public access. So if the marina is public access, that may tie into a requirement that the beaches be public access. The other thing is if you are finding that you're having to do some maintenance there, let us know, because we'll make sure that our Parks and Recs folks provide greater attention to those areas, because, again, it is a collectively shared space. But in terms of what we can do to, so I'm not quite sure what you mean when you say private, because by private you may mean an individual property owner versus the rest of the world, or you may mean the Sudden Valley Community Association versus non-residents who come down and use our beaches. In the case of the latter, I'd say that the challenge there is, if people are coming down there, I mean, I used to live in Sudden Valley. I don't now, but I did when my kids were younger. We would go down to AM and PM Beach when my kids were, 6 and 7, and they'd play, and I did not always have identification with me proving I was a Sudden Valley resident. Nobody ever challenged me on being down there. But I'm thinking, well, if you live in Sudden Valley and you're riding with bikes with your kids down to the beach, and then somebody, and a security guard comes up and asks you to prove who you are or whatever, I mean, I could certainly tell them where I live. But it becomes a little more complicated for acquiring some sort of hard proof of your residency or something. So, and it also is one of those things that if it is a problem, and it likely could be in the summertime, because there's a lot more people down at the beach in the summertime than there were in late December. When I first came on board, I went down there a few times because there was flooding and there was nobody down there. But I do know that in the summertime it probably gets a lot of attention, and so I'll certainly look into seeing what the rules are and seeing what policies we have in place, and if there's things I'd recommend to the board to supplement what we have in place. But I don't know right now what all we have in place.
I believe the person who asked the question, Nadine, has her hand raised, so she may have some clarifying thoughts. I could bring her on over here.
Sure.
All right, Nadine, I've brought you in here. You can unmute when you're ready.
Hi there. Thanks, John, and thank you, Dan. It probably is more complicated than we can sort out now, especially if you're not so familiar with the AM/PM. But what happened was, we're pretty new here. It's been here about 4 years, and the first couple of years, it's just lovely going down there. You can tell it's mostly Sudden Valley people, because that's a kind of public park area for Sudden Valley.
Right.
And there were signs that said, I don't know, something like private property or private access, having to do meaning Valley, not someone's personal home.
Right.
And then a year or two ago, suddenly the place was just swamped with people in the summer. And to the point where I think at one point there were cars all lined up and down there, and they actually had to then put up signs to say you can't park here. So those all had to go in. People were driving across the lawn area there. It was just suddenly inundated, and the signs had come down. And I did ask, I think it's our security people, if they understood what was going on. And the answer I got was something like what you said, that it's because we're a nonprofit, something to the effect of, because we're a nonprofit, we can't actually block that access from people outside Sudden Valley.
Mhm.
But I guess a concern as a resident is that a lot of maintenance has to go in when so many people are using it. I mean, they had to trade out
Right.
the blocks that were protecting the property and put up the signage that said you can't park here. And so that kind of thing. So I just curious about how that law works, I guess.
Sure. Well, and so I need to look more into the law. I mean, I'm familiar, obviously, with just sort of the skeleton of it. But I do know that one of the things that I've thought of is not just for beach users, but for folks that launch their boats here. So for boats, there's only 3 public launches in all of Lake Whatcom that I'm aware of. And so, I know that Blodell Donovan instituted a fee when I was mayor, actually, because it was partly in response to invasive species and doing inspections. But I was thinking, if we maybe need to look at what fees we're charging and charge higher fees for, for non-residents that are coming to use, if that's permissible. Again, I don't know what I have to, I'm hesitant to say exactly what we can do, but I do think that doing something where, I did hear some horror stories. I think it was from last summer where things just kind of got a bit out of hand, and the security had to be called down, and it was kind of a mess, frankly, is what it sounded like. And so I've been thinking about that since I've been made aware of it, because today was a nice day. We're going to have much nicer days coming, and nice days and water. It's like you're going to get crowds showing up, so we need to be preparing for that now. So I am thinking about that, but I don't have any definitive solution. And again, I'm going to be talking about it with the board, but the board's going to end up driving the policy and the like, and then I'll try to figure out ways to implement that. But I know that the board is also aware of these issues. But I thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention in this room tonight. And, I'll continue to look at it, and feel free to reach out again sometime to see where things are.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Nadine. Okay, let's see here. We have, I believe there was this question here may have been answered. You mentioned hiring several senior positions. Which positions have been filled?
So maintenance director, Parks and Rec director, and I think that we're close to filling the deputy GM. But again, that one, we haven't completed the communications with the preferred candidate. So
I've got Linda with her hand raised here. I'm going to go ahead and bring Linda on over here at this point.
Okay.
All right, go ahead and unmute when you're ready, Linda.
Hi, I wanted to answer the question about our our parks.
Uh-huh.
We became a 501c4, which has been several years ago, and if you ask Joel, he can tell you when we did. That's what opened up a lot of our beaches and everything else in particular. And even though it costs us more to do upkeep, we also don't pay taxes at all.
Oh, okay.
And so that's kind of the trade-off that they made. If we
Sure.
have, and that's kind of been an open discussion at one time, and you'd have to go look back and look at the complete application that we sent in. There's things like the quiet pool, which is a very, very small, limited area.
Right.
And we do have a large main pool that people can access, and we invite the public in. There's small areas like that that could be eliminated, but as far as the parks that are basically a park-like area or our common areas, those are it's considered that we have to allow the public in.
Yeah. Okay.
That's that trade-off.
That's great information, Linda. Thank you very much. I appreciate your knowledge of the history there.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. All right, got a few more in Q&A here.
Okay.
Let's see here. Group question. We're heading into the construction season, and you mentioned the environmental planner left,
Mhm.
who I believe was acting as the liaison to the builders. What's the plan for ensuring that our builders have the support and oversight needed to complete their projects in a timely manner, seeing as we have such a short window due to watershed regulations?
Right. So we have, I'm not going to say we've identified the full solution yet, but we do have a consultant that we contract with to do a lot of project management who will probably be helping out with some of that. We also have another person on sort of an on-call staff status who I think will be filling in some as well. And then obviously we're going to be looking to expeditiously fill that environmental planner position. I am on, at least currently, we haven't met for a while, so I'm not sure what the status is, but I've got really close ties to Huxley College. I've been on their advisory committee for the last 9 years. And so I'll reach out to them and see if they've got lists of graduates that are, over the last 5 or 10 years that maybe I can just do an email out to that are from the planning program that would be able to maybe be interested, because a lot of folks that attend Western want to stay here. I know that happened to me. So finding somebody that has been here fairly recently, and even if they've gone to Seattle or further afield, if they're interested in a interesting spot to land, to come back and have a good full-time job, I think we could get somebody to fill it pretty quickly. So we just need to find that. But we do have interim things in place.
And another group question here. What is the plan for the Emergency Preparedness Committee? Especially having been through several emergencies last year, we'd like to see that come back.
So again, I think that's probably a board question, but I will raise that with the board because I'm not aware of that. So we'll ask them and see where it's at and where we're going.
Okay, got a few more here. With the loss of the launch ramp dock, will any of our dock space or wet slips out on the end ties be made available for launching boats to embark and disembark passengers?
So I don't know. I know that right now I think that there aren't any available because we checked into that. I do know that we are working. It's going to be months because unfortunately the dock situation is complicated by the fact that it was put in illegally by a prior administration. And without appropriate permits. And so now we have to go through that process. The county appreciates that we're being forthright with them about what's happened. And they were not happy to find out that we had misrepresented what we were doing. But I don't think it's not going to be an impediment to getting it done again. But it does take time. Right now you can launch, my experience with launching boats is frequently somebody is the person that gets wet, and I've been that person a lot. So that's kind of the price currently. But I'll keep looking at it and see if we can find some sort of interim solution where we can, maybe find a slip we can move a boat that's closer into a different slip if we can find one that's freed up. But as you probably are aware, we've got a pretty lengthy waiting list of people waiting for slips as well. So I'm not promising we'll find a solution quickly, but we're certainly aware of it and looking to see what we can do.
And that question, similar question was asked in chat, but there was also something that kind of went along with that as far as some of these updates here. There's a question as far as updates on when El Agave will be open as the upstairs restaurant.
Sure. And the problem there is we don't know because we're living in a very interesting world these days. The remediation is, if it's not done, it's really close. We just had a meeting with the ownership of El Agave this past week to talk about lease modifications because we recognize that we want to lower the payments that they have to pay since they're not getting access to the full space. We have reached some accommodation where we are going to let them serve, like people can sit in the upstairs tables for when there's sufficient demand. I mean, the real constraint they have right now is that the ovens that they've got downstairs don't allow them the capacity to serve nearly as many people as they could serve when they had the upstairs kitchen facilities available. And those aren't going to be available until the whole thing gets rebuilt. The damage was extensive. And we're in the process of getting ready to do an RFP to get people to bid on it. But in having those conversations with folks, it's also clear that timelines are challenging. For example, I just talked to a locksmith today and all his people are up at the border for the next several days. So I can't get a locksmith in for a simple, just change a tumbler on one lock until Tuesday. I had some conversations looking for an electrician to look at some things recently. And, it took 4 or 5 calls to find somebody that wasn't at least 2 months out. A couple of them, they had everybody down in California working on stuff. There's apparently shipyard work down there that is requiring a lot of electricians. So it's a challenging environment. We're working with El Agave to try to make sure that, as soon as we can get them back upstairs. I think all of us would like to see that facility open and running again. As I said, with Puget Sound Energy, we're going to, I'm planning to talk to them and see, okay, if we swap out some of these stoves, what does that look like? And does that help as well with capacity and other things? But when I talked with El Agave's ownership, I asked them if there's any way to expand the capacity they had downstairs in terms of the cooking capacity is the limiting factor right now. And they really didn't feel there was. So we're kind of just unfortunately stuck in limbo until we get the RFP out, get the response, and see, what the availability is of crews to work on it. Ironically, one of the things working in our favor right now is that interest rates are rising pretty rapidly. That probably is going to start impacting building, in terms of like building new buildings fairly soon. And so that may reduce some of the demand for some of the labor there. And so we may be able to find a faster turnaround than what we're hearing today. In a couple of weeks, it may start softening, I hope. Not that I'm looking for higher interest rates for me personally, that's a challenge, but in terms of managing this particular project, it might be something that helps us out a little bit.
Right. We've got a question here asking for contact manager for Dan Perrine. I might just direct message his email address to the resident.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It looks like Linda has her hand raised again. I'm going to go ahead and bring her on over.
Okay.
All right, Linda, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
So I understand that you filled the 2 positions that you had on the Southern Valley website for the maintenance supervisor and the new Parks and Rec manager.
Yep.
That still states on there that we have 2 positions open. And it says employment opportunities. And I think John's the only one doing website updating right now. But it should probably say go back, maybe come off the main page and go back to, we used to have a lower ordinance of opportunities for employment. And if those are filled, that really should come off there. That's all. There's lots of stuff I won't even go into it right now because it's not your fault. But it's like, that really should come off there if those positions have been filled, because it looks like they're still open.
Okay, and those are fairly recent, but yeah, that's a good point. And I will say that we're looking at in the near future. Near future might be 6 months out, but hopefully sooner. At doing some updates to the website. We've got a board member that's working on that as well.
Yeah, there still needs to be accurate information.
No, I understand that. No, I am not disagreeing with that, and I agree that we need to manage that. But also it'll be easier to navigate and to keep track for ourselves once we get some updates done to the overall website design too. So
okay, I didn't know until you mentioned tonight that you'd filled those positions. And I just went over while you were visiting with some of the other people online and answering questions and looked, because I thought possibly that had been taken off the main page, because I think there's another place down further in the website where it had employment opportunities. And if there's nothing available, it says there's nothing available at this time when we didn't have those positions. And maybe you'll look for maintenance or part-time turf people, I don't know, but probably you should take those 2 positions off there.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We'll do that.
We'll make sure we get that handled, Linda. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we've got, let's see here, a question as far as road improvements. What are the plans for road improvements in our community for 2022?
I should have this memorized. We talked about it a few times in boards. I know we've got a list of roads that we are improving. We've got a pretty substantial road program going out this summer. But honestly, I can't remember what all it is. I know that I was cross-referencing it with our consultant with significant potholes that people were reporting to me. Because it's like, okay, if we're going to start on this project in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and it is something like that. At the time, we're going to start working on it as soon as the weather is good enough that we don't have to worry about it damaging the overlays that we put down. But looking and seeing, so how do we fill these? We obviously, so some of those potholes that people are complaining about, we will be filling basically when we repave so that we don't have to refill it 2 or 3 times in a sort of a futile effort. And in the meantime, please drive carefully around them. And you know, if you want to send me an email, actually, you know what, I will dig that information out, and maybe John, when you take down some of those jobs, we can put up just a blurb about what's happening with the roads, because I know that's pretty nearly, people are asking what brings us together. The roads bring us together, or they divide us, depending on how we feel about them. But you know, I think all of us want to see the road work get done, and so putting that out, I think would help people see. So we'll do that.
All right. Okay, that's pretty much all of our Q&A. There was one brief question here from Diane asking if Dan Perrine was on board at this point. He has been onboarded.
Yes, yeah. Yep. He is on board. Just had a nice talk with him today.
Yeah, definitely. And if anybody else would like to jump in, now's your chance. You'll want to use raise hand in Zoom, but I believe we are clear of questions in the chat and Q&A. And maybe we've got to everything for this evening.
Yeah, well, we'll do it again soon. So,
yep, we'll post that. Believe coming up in about 3 weeks.
Yep. Okay. So thanks everybody for participating. It's I have to say I really enjoy doing this, because I know that there's always questions circulating in the community, and the best way to respond is to have people that are interested, you know, pose them, and we have these conversations, and it's helpful for me in knowing what's on your mind, and bring some things to the board that maybe the board or I had either forgotten about, or, you know, got lost in the shuffle, or just, you know, re-emphasize what we already knew, but say, yeah, we're not the only ones that are noticing these things. So appreciate your helping me do a better job of making this a better community. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.